Thanks, Julie. As I was reading this text about a lot of complaining, you guys already talked about a lot of complaining. I thought, what am I grateful for right now? And I'm grateful for a couple of things, specifically these Wednesday mornings. I'm grateful that we have a host of women who are excited about teaching, and I've only had to teach twice so far. I love teaching, but it's exciting for me to see Danae up here, and Dolly up here, and Annalie up here, and others up here, learning how to teach God's Word, because that means it's going to go from this place to other places. We had a call just the other day on Thursday with 9 other women kind of who we've been associated with that are leading ministry at other churches, so at Westside Church and at Christ City Church and at Tri-City Church, and it was just so encouraging. And Carla, who used to be here as an admin, is now leading a Bible study of 40 women at King Road Church, and it's so exciting for me to see people step into leadership and then take the Word of God to other places, and so I'm super grateful for that. I'm also just really grateful for all of you. Moses in this text is complaining about the people that he has to lead, and he talks about them being a burden, and he talks about, I didn't give birth to these people. I just love how honest he is. And as I was reading it, I thought, I don't feel that way about this group of people. I don't feel that way about my Monday night people. You guys are invigorating me. You're encouraging me. The way that you're interacting with each other, the way that you're loving each other, the way that you're showing grace to each other. It's not that way in every little pocket of our church, as you've heard people say from the front, but what I see on Monday night, what I see on Wednesday morning is people striving to get along and to live in unity with each other, and that's just such an encouragement to me. So thank you for that. I'm very grateful for the efforts that you're making to be God's church and be God's people to each other. So thank you for that. But we're going to get into some complaining because we have to talk about the text today. So I wanted you to know, first of all, that's not my heart at the moment. But we want to think about, as we look at this text, how we respond in wilderness situations. What do we do when we find ourselves in situations where life is all of a sudden taking a left turn, where we feel like we don't know where that end is, where we feel like the resources that we counted on aren't all of a sudden there? How do we respond? What happens in our heart when we're in those situations? I'm going to give you kind of 3 examples of wilderness situations in my life to help you think of what could be similar ones in yours. So I remember when I was 18 years old, I was excited to kind of journey off, do things independently. I signed up for this program to go to France with 85 people from across Canada. I was all excited to kind of be in a new community. I'd been at MEI for 5 years. I'd been at Bradner Elementary for years before. I kind of felt like people here knew who I was, and I wanted to venture out into this new world of kind of unknown and kind of remake myself. And I got into this world with these 85 people from across Canada, and I thought, I do not fit in here. I am the only Christian here, and I'm going to spend my whole summer with these people, and I'm going to be sitting out like a sore thumb. I'm going to feel like I just don't fit. I'm going to feel like I don't have friends. I'm going to be lonely. And I remember as an 18-year-old wrestling in my room at night, thinking, like, what do I do this summer? What does this look like? I don't have any of my friends. I don't have any of my family. I don't have any of my supports around me. What does it look like for me to kind of be who I am in this whole new crowd? I felt like I was walking into kind of a wilderness situation. Years later, some of you have heard some of my stories, so these might be repeats. But years later, I had 2 kids, got pregnant with my 3rd kid, found out that I was actually carrying twins. But 10 weeks into the pregnancy, realized that actually one of the twins wasn't growing to the same level as the other. And so we had this very hard pregnancy of not knowing what God would do in the midst of the situation. And at 26 weeks, my one twin passed away. And all of a sudden, I was faced with how do I mourn the loss of one baby and greet a new baby, and how do I walk through this? And it's a big journey that I can tell you about, but that was a wilderness situation for me. And then how do I get through that, and how do I then move on, and how do I trust God again in the situations that I face? Because that's not what I wanted. I wanted God to come through with a miracle, right? That's what we were praying for. But that didn't happen. Those are kind of short-term situations. Other wilderness situations kind of last longer. So my husband's a realtor, and this has been a struggle for me in the sense that I cannot plan our finances. Some years are awesome, some years aren't. I don't know when I can do a holiday. I don't know what I can spend for my kids for Christmas. I like having a bank account and knowing what money is coming in and what money is going out, and God has said, sorry, you're not going to be able to do that. And so for me, that's a daily, weekly, monthly wilderness thing that I walk through just because I don't have the control over the situation that I'd like. I would like to have full control over my finances, and I don't. Some weeks are good, some months are good, some years are good, some aren't. And so I want you to get a feeling for what I'm talking about when I talk about wilderness situations, those situations where we feel like life is just a bit out of control. We don't really know what's ahead. We don't really know where God is in the middle of it. And so this text, Numbers 11, kind of gives us ideas or two options of what we could do when we're in the wilderness. And it kind of helps us look down the path of where each option is going to take us. We have the Israelites responding one way in the wilderness. We have Moses responding a different way in the wilderness. And we see kind of God's response to both of those. It's given to us as a warning. In 1 Corinthians 10, Paul says that these things happen to us as a warning so that we could learn from what the Israelites did. And so that's what I want us to think about as we go through this text. This text teaches that God will judge those who reject him and strengthen those who serve him. When you're in the midst of a wilderness situation, God will judge those who reject him and strengthen those who serve him. And so will you heed the warning of this text? The text, I kind of broke it down into two parts, basically tells us don't complain about God. Complain to God. And we're going to look at what's the difference between that as we walk through this text. Because the Israelites are complaining about God. Moses is complaining to God, and somehow they get a different response from God. So the big idea, God will judge those who reject him, strengthen those who serve him. And we're going to look at those 2 points. But before we get into those 2 points, I just wanted to talk briefly about Numbers 11, 1 to 3. They kind of give us a pattern for what's going to happen in the next whole rest of the book of Numbers. It reads like this. It says, "And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them." We're going to see throughout the rest of the book of Numbers that this pattern kind of keeps repeating itself. And so every time we have a story, we want to kind of compare it to this story to understand, how Israel is moving, how they're learning stuff. Maybe there's going to be parts that are different from this pattern. Then we want to say, okay, what's different about this story? Because the basic pattern is the people complain, God kind of gives them a warning shot, right? Like there's fire in the bushes out there, so beware. They repent, they come back, they pray, Moses prays for them, God relents, and then they name it something. That's the basic pattern. In this story, we see Moses does not intercede for the people. So there's a differentiation on the pattern. Moses has to learn something too. It's not just the people have to learn something, Moses has to too. And so if we compare this pattern to every story that comes later, we'll see, what other piece is happening here that's not part of the normal pattern? The normal pattern would just be that Moses prayed and the people responded. But here, Moses actually doesn't pray. Not for the people anyways, he prays for himself. So what are we learning here about Moses? Moses has something to learn. I want us to think too that we do these kind of things all the time. There's the fancy theological word is an etiological tale, which means an origin tale, like the origins of a name of a place, right? And we have memories that are associated with places that we'll make as families, right? So we have one spot on the Hope Princeton Highway where there's this "Welcome to the Okanagan Smilkameen" sign. And every time we drive by as a family, we say certain things because there was a time when our motorhome broke down right in front of that sign. And it was like 40 degrees, and there was no shade, and our kids were little, and we had to run under some bushes so that we didn't kind of overexpose ourselves to heat. And my husband was out flagging down traffic, and it was August long weekend, and it was just chaos. And my youngest son, who's 8 at the time, he said, "Why don't we just die right here? Why don't they just kill us now?" And so every time we drive by that sign, "Why don't we just die right here? Why don't we just kill us now?" Because it's a memory of that place, right? And so as Israel going through the wilderness, they're memorizing, or they're having memories associated with each place. So this place was memorialized Taberah. The next place that we get is memorialized Kitoth Havera, or whatever you say it, Hatava. But they're building memories related to places and what happened at those places. And we do that too. So we want to see, we're part of this, we're people like the Israelites, right? We do these same kind of things. So what we want to do then is go into the text. We want to learn from this text. Don't complain about God, but complain to God. So I'm not going to walk through the text kind of totally chronologically, because the way it works out is that we have the people's complaint at the beginning, and then we have God responding to the people's complaint at the end. And in the middle, we have Moses' complaint and God's response to Moses' complaint. So I'm going to deal with kind of the two outside pieces of the sandwich, the two pieces of bread, and then we're going to deal with Moses in the middle. So first of all, we're going to talk about the beginning of the text and the end of the text. So verse 4 to 6 and verse 10 is where we're going to start. Don't complain about God is the part of this, or the kind of the big theme for this part. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, "Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost us nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic, but now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at." And then verse 10, Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord blazed hotly and Moses was displeased. In this text, they want meat. They don't want manna. Some of us were tempted to sympathize. We're like, yeah, eating manna for a whole year, that would be really boring. But the authors here don't give us that room for sympathy, right? God's not sympathizing. Moses isn't sympathizing. If you read Psalm 78, which was in our Gospel Connections, if you read Psalm 106, the biblical authors weren't sympathizing with them. So why not? So if we read on in verse 18 to 20, God kind of tells them why we shouldn't sympathize with them. God's saying to Moses, "And say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. Therefore, the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall eat not just 1 day or 2 days or 5 days or 10 days or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you. Because," why? "Because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and you have wept before him, saying, why did we come out of Egypt?" God is not sympathizing with them because their actions or complaining is showing that they're rejecting him. That they're rejecting his provision of manna, that they're rejecting his promises. So in Exodus 16, they actually had no food. They came out of Egypt in Exodus 15. There's this great song of them kind of going through the water. Exodus 16, they had no food or no water, and God provided manna for them. And he also provided quail for them at the moment. And since then, it's been a daily, miraculous provision of needs. In verse 9, as it's describing, it's kind of a little excursus that goes to the side describing the manna for a couple of verses. It says, when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. So every single day, God provided them for what they need. But for them, it wasn't good enough, right? They wanted more variety. Any of us who've dealt with little kids who don't want to eat the food that we've given them know how annoying that could be, right? My daughter, she would be famous for, especially at Grandma and Grandpa's place, like not wanting to eat supper, but then, of course, having lots of room for dessert after, right? And my mom and dad were like, oh, that's so sweet, she can have dessert. I'm like, no, she has to eat what I provided for her, right? We know that frustration. But we can be that way ourselves. As I said, through kind of the real estate trials of trying to figure out how to deal with this kind of fluctuating finances, there's been times where I've been so mad at God because I don't have my monthly bread. I don't have my annual bread. And God's kind of reminded me, but do you have your daily bread? Do you have what you need for today? Do you have what you need to get through today? And I'll usually say to myself, oh yeah, I do, and probably for the week. I don't necessarily know the month or the year, but we get so demanding. We don't want just our daily bread. We want actually more than that. We want variety. We want better stability. So they're rejecting God's gracious provision for them, the daily provision. Israel's complaining about that. They're also rejecting his promises. So I want you to think about how long these promises have been in action. God, in Genesis 12, promised to Abraham that he would make him a great nation, that he would bless him, that he would bless the whole world through him, that he would bring him into this land. And 400 years they've been in slavery, and God's been working this plan. He's been building this great nation. He's been doing all these things. He's been building these promises to them, and they're now on their journey to the promised land, and 3 days into the journey, they want to turn back. They say, 3 days is pretty hard. Like, I know you've been at this for 400 years, God, but 3 days and we don't really like it. We want to go back to Egypt. They've been at Mount Sinai for a year, but now it's just like last week when Dolly taught, like they walked for 3 days and then the complaining starts. And so they're turning their back on his promises. I remember when some friends of ours, they had really rough financial years too, and they really wanted to bring their kids to Disney World in Florida. They saved up, they got scrimped and scraped, managed to get a trip for the family to Florida. They wanted to go to Disney World, and their son just wanted to sit in the hotel room and play video games. And they're just like, seriously, like we have been working so hard to get you to this thing, and we know it's going to be great. And he had no appetite for that. He just wanted to sit and play video games. I just want to go home. I don't want to be here. And as parents, they were like, this is ridiculous. And that's what God's saying, like, I know what I have for you. I know the promises I have for you. I've been working at this for 400 years. Just keep going with me. And they're wanting to turn their back on those promises. So what happened because of that? Well, they're judged. So verse 31 to 35, it says this, then a wind from the Lord sprang up, and it brought quail from the sea and let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the ground. And the people rose all that day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quail. Those who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. While the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. Therefore, the name of that place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people who had the craving. From Kibroth Hattaavah, the people journeyed to Hazeroth, and there they remained at Hazeroth. Because of their craving, because they complained about God, God judged them. And sometimes, especially in this day and age, that can be a really troublesome thing for us to work our minds around. We don't like this idea that God will actually come in judgment, that God actually has anger, and that God has wrath against people who disobey him. So I hope if you went through the Gospel Connection section, you saw that throughout Scripture, the repeated idea is that yes, God does judge those who reject him, like we see in this text, but it's never without warning, and it's always a result from willful disobedience. People know what they're supposed to do, and they willfully decide not to. And at the end of a certain number of years of warning, or days of warning, or centuries of warning in some cases, all of a sudden God says, okay, that's enough. And in this situation, they knew what they were supposed to do. God was not having a temper tantrum. He wasn't just randomly expressing his anger. He had a righteous anger against people who willfully were rejecting his provision and willfully rejecting his promises. In verse 20, it says, he warns them, like, if you eat this, it will become loathsome to you. He gives them that warning ahead of time, and yet they still continue to eat it, and it does become loathsome, and they end up dying from this plague. So, God judges those who reject him. So we need to think about that for our own lives. How could we be in danger of rejecting God's provision for us? How could we be in danger of rejecting his promises? So I want you to imagine that you have kind of your daily needs, you have the things that God has provided for you, but you don't have something that you crave. That's what the word's used in here. Something that you crave, right? Here they craved meat. We can be single and crave a boyfriend or a husband. We can crave a child. We can crave recognition. Maybe we're in a job where we're not getting the recognition that we want. We can crave that recognition. For me, what I realized with the real estate thing is I was craving security. I wasn't able to just appreciate what God was providing. I was craving the security that came from money. We could maybe look on Instagram and crave the vacations that people are going on, or crave the friends that they have. There's so many ways that we can reject what God has already given us, reject the provision that he's already given us, and crave something else. So what do you do in those moments when you sense those cravings? The Israelites complained about God. So what could that look like for us? Well, their complaining was weeping, right? Weeping, whining. We could become bitter in those midst of cravings. We could feel despair. We could shake our fist in anger at God. That would be a response that would be similar to their weeping. We could have a physical response. So the Israelites' physical response is they actually walked away from the presence of the God to get the quail, right? They walked, it says, a day's journey outside camp. The tabernacle was in the center of camp. They were walking away from God. And so we can turn our back on God in the midst of unanswered cravings and say, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm going to find my own way. I'm going to chart my own path. That's how we can reject God's provision. Personally, there was a situation in my life. I was ministering at another church, doing some women's ministry stuff, and there was a couple of things that I felt like I needed God to just kind of clear up in my life before I continued on ministry. And so I said, Lord, I'm going to withdraw from serving you until you figure out these things. And I basically put myself on the shelf for about 5 years. And then God basically tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know what? You can do it. I'll clear these things up at my own time, my own will. You serve me. We can sometimes put ourselves out, take ourselves out of things because we're putting conditions on God. We're saying, I don't want you to just provide me with the basic needs. I want you to actually fulfill all these conditions. So are you rejecting God's provision? In Genesis 3, we see that rejection of provision is the very root of all sin, right? Because Adam and Eve had everything they wanted. They had this perfect garden. They had perfect relationship with God and man. They had all the food they needed. God gave everything and it was good, and yet they wanted something else. They rejected God's good provision and they sought something else. The Israelites who were rejecting manna, God's ultimate provision is the escape from sin and death. His ultimate provision for us is the fact that his son came and lived a perfect life, died on the cross on our behalf, is resurrected, offers us eternal life, and people reject that provision. We can be in danger of rejecting salvation. And this text is telling us danger. If you reject God's provision, you're in danger of his judgment. God will judge those who reject him. So how do we reject? That's how we reject his provision. How do we reject his promises? I think it's easy for us. The Israelites kind of knew what they kind of wanted from the past in Egypt. This future was unknown. They didn't really know how great it was going to be. They were willing to give up this good future, the future promises, for the sake of kind of the unknown and the cravings that they had every day. We can do that too. We know that God has offered us eternity with him. We know that he's offered us all these promises, but right now it's really more important for me to fit in with these friends, and it's really more important for me to kind of not stand out and not be kind of super committed to God, because that might throw my friends away. And so I know God's provided all these promises for me for the future, but right now, I kind of don't want to do that. I kind of want to put that at jeopardy. God's laws are really restrictive, and so I know he's promised me kind of eternity with him, but right now, I just want this relationship right now. I want to be with this man who's not my husband. I want to be with this woman who's not my husband. I want to be in a relationship that doesn't necessarily honor God, because that future promise is way out there, and I want something now. And so we're willing to turn our back on his promises. I don't want to love that person. I don't want to forgive that person. And so we allow bitterness and we allow anger to build up in our hearts, which puts a wedge between us and God, which puts in jeopardy those future promises. And we sit together with people as pastors and we say, this is the path you're going on, and if you continue on this path, you may put your eternal life in jeopardy. And people are like, but this is what I want now. And so we need to think about, God has offered us this future promise, a future life with him, a future life without pain and sorrow and sadness. Are we willing to put that at jeopardy to fulfill our cravings now? That's what the Israelites were doing. They were putting at jeopardy this whole future that God promised them because they wanted security now. They wanted Egypt now. So the danger in this text is that God will judge those who reject him. God has provided us everything that we need for life, air in our breath, for salvation, for our future life. We may find ourselves in wilderness situations, but this text would warn us, don't complain about God and turn back. The author of Hebrews talks about these bad decisions of Israel in the wilderness, Hebrews 3:12-15. He says this, you should learn from the Israelites. He says, take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have come to share in Christ if we indeed hold our original confidence firm to the end. As it is said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. The Israelites allowed their hearts to be hardened, and then they put their future promise at jeopardy. And the author of Hebrews is saying, don't do that. Don't let sin harden your hearts so that you disobey, so that you put your eternity at stake. And today, if you're being convicted by the scriptures, today, turn back. There's always room, if you have breath in your lungs, today, to turn back. And so do it. If you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. If you're here today and you've never made a decision to follow Jesus, I want you to know that God will judge those who reject him, but he's provided everything that you need for salvation. And so today, if you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts as he did at the rebellion. So, we're not supposed to complain about God, but does that mean we have to be happy, clappy Christians who always think that everything is wonderful and we can always have joy? Is that what we learn from this text? Well, no. God will judge those who reject him, but he will strengthen those who serve him. So, we need to follow Moses' example here. Complain to God, not about God. Complain to him. Verse 10, Moses says, it says, Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. So Moses is angry. He's not unemotional here. He's not happy about the situation. But what does he do with his emotion? He complains to God about it. Verse 11-15, Moses said to the Lord, why have you dealt ill with your servant, and why have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all these people? For they weep before me and say, give us meat that we may eat. I'm not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once, if I find favor in your sight, that I might not see my wretchedness. This is why I thought of my son's story. Why don't you just kill me now? Why don't we just die right here? Moses is so relatable. He is completely overwhelmed. He says, this task is too much. There's 600,000 people here. I can't feed them. I can't bear the burden of all of them. It's so relatable. Have you ever said something like this? Maybe you're not in charge of that many people, but said, Lord, I can't do this. There's no way I have the strength to do this. I'm overwhelmed. This task is too much. I can't bear this burden. If you read through my prayer journal, probably there's like once a month that I'm there saying, okay, God, I don't know how I'm going to get through this day. Help me. God's response is so beautiful here. Basically, it's, I get it. I'll help you. Right? That's his response, verse 16 to 17. The Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take some of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of that people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. That is such a beautiful 2 verses, right? God knew that Moses wasn't Superman. He said, you don't have to do this all by yourself. He knows that all of us aren't superwomen. We don't have to bear the burden of the things that we're carrying ourselves. God welcomes us to come to him with our complaints, with our concerns. Psalm 103, 13 to 14, I think it's King David. He says this, as a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. For he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. God knows that he made people from the dust of the earth. He knows we have limited strength. He knows we need to sleep. He knows we need to eat. He knows we need energy. He knows we need refreshment. He knows we need physical needs. He knows we need spiritual needs. He knows we need emotional needs. God knows that. And so he has compassion on us. When you're tired and overwhelmed, he's not saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Suzanne. He's not saying that. He's saying, I know. I understand. I know you're dust. I have compassion on you. I'll be with you. I'll help you bear your burden. God's okay with us whining to him. If you read the Psalms, there's 150 Psalms. Over 50 of them are lament Psalms, where people are saying, why, God? What are you doing, God? Why are the wicked prospering, God? I don't know what you're doing. You're so far from me. Why are you not listening to me? That's in the Bible. It's okay for us to say those things. It's okay for us to wrestle. In the book of Job, Job wrestles with God over the things that have happened, which are hard in his life. And God at some point stands up and says, God, Job, I actually know more than you, and this is why. But at the very end of the book of Job, he says to him, but Job, you're a righteous man. You wrestled with me in righteousness. You didn't sin in your questioning. God is okay with our questioning. In 1 Samuel 1, we have a story of Hannah, who's a woman who's childless, and she's pouring out her soul to God, and God answers her with a child. And that's in our scriptures. She's complaining to God about her situation. She's complaining about this wife, the second wife of her husband, who keeps kind of mocking her. She's complaining about these things to God. And that is what God welcomes as a father who loves us. God wants us to complain to him. He wants to help us. He's going to strengthen those who serve him. So Moses was not yet done complaining. Verse 21 and 22, Moses said, the people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot. And you have said, I will give them meat that they may eat a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them and be enough for them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them and be enough for them? He's like, how, God? First of all, he's why, God, the first little bit. Now he's how, God? I don't understand how you're going to do this. It made me think of the disciples as Jesus was sitting on the mount with them, and he said, feed these people. And they said, how? Like, how can we feed all these people? Moses is like the disciples at that moment. I don't know how this can happen. But God's response, the Lord said to Moses, is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not. God's response is, I'm not worried about that. I can do whatever I want, but I want you to learn that you can trust me, that my word to you will come true. And so I put you in the situations that you know that I can trust you. And that's the climax of the story. After here, we have lots of different action, but kind of nothing new that's said. This is the last kind of thing that's said in the text from God, that my hand is not shortened. Now you will see that my word will come true. So the text ends in verse 24 to 30. I'll quickly read that. So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him and took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue doing it. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent, and so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, My lord Moses, stop them. They're all jealous for Moses' sake. But Moses said to them, Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. And Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. Moses learns a bunch of different things in this lesson. First of all, he learns that it's okay to complain to God. Secondly, he learns that these people are actually God's people. Right? The very first complaint, he's talking about, what about these people you've given me, and this people, and this people, and this people? And now he said, would that all of God's people are prophets? He somehow learned in this text that this is actually God's problem, that these are God's people. And he's allowing me to kind of be here as a leader, but it's God's people. And so I'm not going to put a box around what God's going to do. These are God's people. God would take care of them because they're his people. So rather than interceding for the people, like I said, normally Moses does in every other story, here he complains to God, and he learns that that's okay, that God will care for him and that God will care for his people. So what are we supposed to do in light of this text? Well, we're supposed to complain to God, not about God. Where should we do this? In what situations should we complain to God? Whenever we are overwhelmed, like Moses. When we feel like we're in that wilderness situation. When we don't know how the day's going to unfold, when the week's going to unfold, how the year's going to unfold, it's okay to complain to God. The psalmists complain when they're hurt or confused or scared, when they feel angry or overlooked, when they felt abandoned, when they felt misunderstood. So why? Why should we complain to God? Well, Hebrews 4 invites us to. Hebrews 4, 14 to 16. Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So let us then, with confidence, draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. We're invited to come into God's throne room to ask for Jesus' help, to know that he walked this earth as a human, he knows what it's like, to know that God has compassion on us, and to find help in time of need. That's why we should. How do we do this? Well, we know as women it's good to have a good cry sometime. It's good to let it all out, find some kind of emotional release. I often go for like a fast run with my dog, blow off steam, right? That is what the psalmists do. Maybe write out your complaint, speak it out, talk it out, pray it out loud. And then once you've kind of got that out, that energy out, follow the pattern of the psalmist. All the psalms start with this big, long complaint, and then there's a part in the middle. They say, okay, now that I've complained, what do I know to be true about God? What do I know to be true about my situation? What can I thank God for? And so they stop themselves. After they don't pretend that all is good at the beginning. They allow themselves to get it out, but then they stop and say, okay, now what do I need to know? What do I need to know true of God? What do I know to be true of this situation? What can I thank God for at the moment? His provision, his promises in the midst of this. And then the habit that we're getting into here, adoration, confession, supplication. Pray prayers to God of adoration. What can we thank God for? What can we praise God for in the middle of this? What might we need to confess in our hearts about our attitudes, about our fears, about our concerns in the middle of this? And what can we ask God for based on this situation that we're in, based on his scriptures? Ask God for help to calm our hearts, for resolve, for courage, for whatever we need to make it through that next hour or that next day or that next week. And in this text, we see Moses just complaining to God, but I'd say include people in your complaining to God if you need to. If you need encouragement from a brother or sister, if you want to say, you know what, I'm really struggling here, help me talk through how God can be here in this. You don't want to go complain to people about God, But if you have good, trusted people alongside you that can help you think rightly, that's so beneficial, because we can sometimes get into little tailspins in our own minds, right? Where we get into a bad pattern of thinking, and we need a brother or sister to walk alongside us and say, actually, this is what God's word says about it. So welcome that input. In France, that story that I talked about at the beginning, I had a real night of complaining to God. I said, God, I don't want to be in this situation where I feel lonely and alone and the only Christian. And I whined about it all night, and finally I said, well, I guess this is where I am. And I don't want to turn my back on God because that feels way too scary. And so God, just give me the power to get through these next 8 weeks. And I ended up really having a great summer of learning about myself, learning about what it looks like to be a Christian in an environment that's totally hostile, feeling God's strength for me every day. I whined, got it out, and then God gave that to me. When I lost my son Alex, there was months of complaining to God about it. There was months of crying in the car as I was walking. There was months of sitting in church and not being able to sing worship songs because I knew in my head that God was good, but I couldn't feel it in my heart. But I went to God with it in the midst of that. In my whole real estate financial ups and downs, it's years of complaining to God. Every time, okay, why this again? But it's a pattern that I've got into of saying, okay, God, I don't like this. This is the situation. But Lord, what do I know about true? What have you done for me in the past? What do I know to be true about who you are and what you care about me? And how does that help me in the future? And Lord, help me to think rightly about you. So this text teaches that God will judge those who reject him, strengthen those who serve him, and it encourages us, it exhorts us to complain to him, not about him. So let's pray to that end, and then let's talk about that at other tables. Lord, I thank you that you're a God that hears. I thank you that you're a father that has compassion on your children. You don't sit up there with your arms crossed, angry at us for being tired or overwhelmed or discouraged. You know what it's like because Jesus walked the earth with us. He knows what it's like to be rejected, to be tired, to be hungry, to have crowds of people pulling at you at all moments. And so, Lord, you sympathize with us. You walk alongside us, and you welcome our complaints, and you say, I'm here to help you. I'll send my spirit to help you. And so, Lord, I pray that we would be women who complain to you, who run to you with our concerns and our burdens, rather than running away from you. That we would be women who come to you with our hands open before you and asking you to help us understand, to help us have the strength to persevere, rather than our hands closed in a fist of anger against you, Lord. May you guide us as we walk through different wilderness situations, Father. Would you help us, come to you with all our concerns and find you faithful. Pray these things in your name by the power of your Spirit. Amen.
You are love, you bring life. your praise.